My name is Rebecca, Director of Business Development at OurCrowd. I'm very excited about the topic and very excited to welcome you. And not to take too much time of the panel, I want to introduce and invite Ido Fischler from SAP. I thought that the best way to introduce corporate innovation is by showing you a real case study. So please, Ido, welcome.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, actually. There's no sunlight here, so I don't know what time is it already. Who here uses or knows what SAP is? Okay, who never used an SAP product ever in his life? Okay, I thought that everyone's going to raise their hand, so actually you guys know what SAP is, but actually even the 3 people that didn't raise their hand, you're wrong, because if you drove a car here, or you ever booked a flight, or if you ever, been on an airplane, so you used SAP, because as an end customer, our software actually is the software that makes the companies that has the airplanes and has the car manufacturers and all those industries run the way they run and make the world run as it runs today, as we know it. That's what SAP does, so behind the scenes. So my name is Ido Fischler, and I'm leading business development for SAP here in Israel. That means that I have multiple kind of roles right now. I'm looking at early stage startups for investment via SAP.io fund. It's our corporate venture capital fund for early stage investments. I'm also working with corporate development in SAP on strategic partnerships that we can do with growth companies here in Israel. And eventually we are looking at potential acquisitions opportunity here in Israel, like Gigia that you probably heard of in September last year. So I want to tell you a story about a guy I've met like a year ago. His name is SHACHAR. I actually didn't meet SHACHAR directly. We had a customer, a very big shipping company in Israel. Without saying the name, you probably know who I mean. That came to us and asked for a specific solution. So this company is moving shipping containers from country to country all over the world. The problem is they don't have any visibility on the location of each container, if someone opens the container or not, etc., etc. The container is basically stupid, and they want to make a smart physical container. So we said, okay, we have a platform for freight management. We have a platform for Internet of Things, but we don't have a solution like you're talking about. We started investigating what startups are there in Israel that can serve this kind of need. We found a few, and we didn't know who to choose, so we decided to do a hackathon. We brought in a few companies. SHACHAR was the one that won the hackathon. Cut a long story short, SHACHAR started to work with our IoT accelerator in Berlin, where he integrated his solution to SAP Cloud Platform and the IoT services. He was giving talks in multiple conferences that SAP conducts around the world and being introduced to our biggest customer in that freights area. We ended up accepting Loginno, that's the name of SHACHAR's company, to our, we ended up accepting them to our foundry. It's our startup accelerator that we partner with the F2 Capital. It's called The Junction in Tel Aviv, one of the more prestige accelerators that we have in Tel Aviv. So SHACHAR was there, part of the cohort number 17, or WAVE, as they call it. By the way, OurCrowd is an investor in F2 Capital, so here where it all connect. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite SHACHAR from Loginno, the CEO of Loginno, to tell the story from his point of view. SHACHAR.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'll try to make it short. So we are Loginno. Loginno, that's short for Logistic Innovation, and we do make stupid containers into smart containers. I had two choices coming here. Either to explain why does a corporate need to partner with startups, and why do startups could really benefit from corporates, or I could just, but I think they're gonna cover this ad nauseum in this panel. But I would like to tell you how I thought when SAP approached me. And the thought was, and I would like to invoke a very Jewish concept of marriage, in which one side is the exotic, Middle Eastern, mysterious technology, sexy spouse. I'll let you decide which is the husband, which is the wife. I'm not falling for that. And the other is the big European, respectable, rich spouse. We started dating. It really felt like dating. And then we started talking about the mutual benefits of each. And we did end up consummating the marriage by creating applications together, which are super smart, AI, advanced thinking, and all of it is the fruit of a startup and a corporate working together. I have to finish with one example, and that's a conversation that I have with Tanya Rickert, who is the top IoT executive in SAP. She asked me in one of the SAP conferences, she asked me, what were your impressions of working with SAP? And I told her, listen, I thought that it's going to be a very big organization, very slow to react, but I was really surprised to find that the answers were super quick. The thinking was top-notch, really strategic thinking, agility, everything. She looked at me and said, I want to tell you two things. One, can I quote you? I said, sure. Second, you don't know how hard we worked in order for you to tell us this feedback. So if you are a startup looking for a corporate, or if you are a startup, I fully recommend first exploring the option of working with a corporate. Second, work with SAP, because they're the best. Thanks.
Thank you, Ido. Thank you, Shachar. So we start the panel, and I'd like to invite all our participants with our Daphne Gottschalk, Head of Innovation from Amdocs. We have MICHAL VAKRAT from, Head of Corporate Innovation Strategy from Lear. LEONARD BRODY, Chairman of Creative Labs, a company of CIA. VIJAY ANAND, Senior Vice President of Intuit. And again, Ido FISHLER from Business Development at SAP. So before, I'm going to let them introduce themselves shortly, but I like to quote a person that's definitely my role model, Sheryl Sandberg. And she says, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Leadership belongs to those who take it. So I think here we actually have representatives of people that definitely go the extra mile to make it happen, to make innovation happen. And we have the opportunity to hear about their experiences, how they actually implement corporate innovation inside their companies, in which ways. So please, Ido.
So I think I presented myself before, so I won't be long. So except SAP IO Fund that want to invest in the best startups that we see strategic alignment to what we do, we also do it internally. So we have an entrepreneurship program. I'm going to, I think, talk about that later on. Strategic partnerships, acquisitions. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. My name is VIJAY ANAND. I head Intuit's Global Development Centers. We have R&D centers around the world, 2 strategic ones outside the US, here in Israel and in India. We have an amazing center in Israel. We acquired 2 companies, and what we have committed to is making it a strategic development center where we want to significantly grow, given the talent here is amazing. And we also want to be able to do cutting-edge work in AI and machine learning, all towards our mission, right? As a company, Intuit is all about powering prosperity around the world. We focus on the world's small businesses and consumers and be able to do all the things that we can do using technology to allow them to make more money with no work and complete confidence. So it's great to be here in Israel, my 4th visit. Thank you.
Good. My name is Leonard. I am the chairman and founder of something called Creative Labs, which is a very specific model around corporate innovation that was taken on by CAA. So for those of you that don't know CAA, it's the largest sport and entertainment agency in the world. So we would represent about 70% of the AAA talent in Hollywood that you would know, many of the actors and actresses that make up Hollywood, and when that comes to sport, we would represent about 80%. So clients like Cristiano Ronaldo, for example, would be who we work with and represent. So we run a specific joint venture which is involved at innovating the company from the outside in.
Hi, my name is MICHAL. I'm representing Lear Corporation in Israel. Did any of you use Lear components? No, you do, every day probably. We are one of the biggest tier 1 suppliers for automotive. So we make car seats, seatings for many of the brands that you probably drive. We make electronics for, again, the biggest OEMs. And our role in Israel, what we're looking to do, and have started a year ago almost, is to work with the Israeli ecosystem. So we're looking for partnerships, investments, acquisitions. We recently acquired a company here called EXO in December in GPS accuracy. And we're expanding. We're expanding into the area of autonomous cars, connected cars. We're already in EVs, IoT for cars. Any relevant startups is welcome to approach us. Yeah, I'm here after the event.
So hi, my name is Daphne Gottschalk. I'm leading Amdocs Innovation Program. For those who don't know Amdocs, we're a large corporation. We serve the largest telecommunication companies in the world. As head of innovation, I didn't start in the innovation domain. I've been head of innovation for the past 3 years. Most of my career I spent actually on the business side, which I believe gave me kind of a healthy view into innovation. I had a small team of 18 people and 1 humanoid robot, which we just had to join our team, and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll actually start with Daphne. I think Amdocs is a global company known very well in Israel, but also abroad. But I think that people are less aware of what are the practices that you use on innovating internally and externally. So I'd love to hear, what are the best practices from our conversations and from what you can see. Amdocs definitely knows how to keep ahead of the game. They're pretty large companies, so if you could tell us a little bit more about it, and also how do you prioritize between internal and external innovation?
So thank you for the question. First of all, thank you for how you phrased the question. We are very proud to be the leader in the market in terms of software for telecom companies. And if we look at Amdocs, we are a 35-year-old company. We took a decision earlier on to tie our destiny to communication industry. And actually the first system that we ever did was for Yellow Pages. But we're not a yellow page company. We never were. We're a customer experience systems organization. And ever since that, the company has evolved and reinvented itself every few years in order to, exactly like you said, stay ahead of the market. And I think the biggest thing for Amdocs in terms of strategy was always to try to understand not only where the market is going and what our customers are going to need in the future, but what are the expectations of their end customers. So think about that. You know, there are many B2B companies here. We typically tend to think about what does our key customer want, right? What does the enterprise want? But if you really want to innovate, you need to understand what the end customers are going and what's their expectations. And that's something that as a company, in a large company, how do you get your 26,000 employees to constantly think at the end user? So I'll give you two examples of a very large and strategic innovation program. One of them would be around getting inspiration. So if you're thinking about your end customers, the expectations of your end customers are not coming directly from the vertical that you're operating in. They're actually developing these expectations elsewhere. And what we typically do with our leadership and with our customers, we take them to an innovation safari to get inspiration from other companies, from startup companies, from other innovators. So let's take, for example, if you're trying to think about how to personalize your business, it wouldn't be useful for our customers to go and see how another telco is personalizing their offerings. But if you take them to London and you take them to a brewery called Meantime, who are actually personalizing their beer according to your genetic sequencing, they take a sample of your DNA and 2 weeks later they ship you a beer that exactly matches your DNA, that's a hyper-personalization. Or if you take them into a fashion company who learns by algorithm your clothing preferences to the point that they can anticipate what clothes you want to wear and go a step beyond and send you periodically, send you the clothes that they think you're going to like and have you keep the ones that you like and send off the ones that you don't like. These are examples of expectations that your end customers are going to have when they're going to buy your next phone. And if some of you have interacted with some of your operators, go to their e-commerce. I have 6 iPhones at home. If I go to a website of my communication operators and the coupon that I get is for an Android phone, there's nothing to be learned there. So getting inspiration from other industries is keys because our end customers are getting educated from other industries. The other thing that we use, and SAP here are the masters of design thinking, and for those of you who don't know, design thinking is all about empathizing with your end users. So how do you basically put yourselves in the shoes of your end users, the end customers, while using your products and services? And it's a very emotional process. You're trying to empathize with the end user. So using design thinking within Amdocs, which is something that the innovation team has been working on the past few years with Stanford University, with HPI, is something that has gave us a healthy way, a healthy perspective to how to design our products and services in a manner that will delight our end users, our end customers, and allow our customers to get a better understanding and ahead of the curve when addressing their end customers' use. As for your second questions, do we prioritize between internal and external innovation? I would say not, for 3 reasons. The first one is if you're not treating internal DNA issues, if you're not investing in your own talent and allowing them to innovate, you're never going to get to a cultural, organizational culture that will allow you to adopt innovation from the outside. Because culture eats innovation for lunch. So if you're not allowing your own people to do it, they will reject anything and everything that will come from the outside. The second reason is if you do manage to create the culture and the methods to allow your own talent to innovate, why would you skip that? I mean, we're all in the innovation business. We know conversion rates. It's not like in startups, right? 2%. But really, I mean, corporates who manage to get 12, 20% out of the ideas commercialized and productized, this is a phenomenal conversion rate. So it's a numbers game. You want as much as you can, inside and outside. And the third reason is even more important, is the expectation today in the market is to co-innovate, to co-create. And the essence of separating between external and internal is basically diminishing. And I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. He's French and he is an engineer. Nothing to do with it, but it's kind of an intriguing combination. And he built his at the process of finishing his house, house of his dream. And in December he moved in and the bathrooms were not ready. So he decided he's going to do it himself. He said, I have December off, I'll do the bathroom. He had 3 bathrooms. The first one he attempted to do himself, and it took him more than a week. It was very difficult. It came out perfectly, exactly how he wanted it, but he broke his back. So the second one he said, no way, I'm going to do it. So he hired somebody else to do it for him. It took only 3 or 4 days. He hated the result. The third one, he actually picked somebody and did it with him. He paid half the price, half the time, and he liked the results. The analog is that most of the large corporations in the world today are becoming technology companies. As such, they want to co-create, and they have the capability to do that. So finding the right methods and platforms to do it together, in my mind, is the best way to go. We have somebody here from AT&T sitting in the room. We have a joint innovation center with AT&T. It's called the Foundry, sitting here in Ra'anana, where we co-create together with AT&T and with the Israeli ecosystem of startups, solutions within a matter of weeks to address business issues of AT&T. I think it's probably one of the best examples to how you can co-create at a triangle, a behemoth like AT&T, a large enterprise like Amdocs, and many, many startups. Some of them are actually in your portfolio. Very innovative and very practical solutions for a real business issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. Next question is for Leonard, because I think it's very interesting I'm going to ask you to give a little more highlights on Creative Labs, because I don't think people are so aware of what you're doing. But it's interesting because you actually are the open innovation, or like the external innovation of companies. And you can give us your own view on how companies actually, if you see it's a good idea of internally innovate or invest in these type of structures when you're actually offering the services to do it yourself. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you probably don't know about us because it was designed that you don't know about us. So we're intended to sort of be the Sith Lord in the background doing crazy stuff that nobody's supposed to know about, and we're pretty stealth about the projects that we work on and what we do. Our largest shareholder and parent is CAA, which is a very unique organization in the world in terms of its understanding. I would argue we probably have the best consumer intelligence on the planet. So we sit on top of about 8.5 billion deduped social media accounts that we sort of actively work with or control or partner with. And most of what we do is really based on a philosophy around every organization is different. So to say external innovation is better in one place or internal or a blend is totally dependent on the DNA of the organization. It's like saying one school is better for one child or another. It's really dependent on the circumstances. In our circumstances, it just worked better to have an organization who was consistently challenging. We follow like an alpha mode mentality, which is we're consistently in testing mode. We build our own products. We don't invest, the lab, we don't invest in third parties. We don't invest in third party entrepreneurs. We take a very specific data-driven approach, a correlative data approach, where we will look at fragmented markets, and we're predominantly consumer-based, so we would look for fragmented audiences. We would then look to see if talent or celebrity was a good way to re-amalgamate or reassemble that demographic at a very low cost of acquisition, keeping the LTVs very high. And that's functionally what we do, and we would look at that in the traditional areas you would think that people in the sport and entertainment business would look at. And we would also look in other areas by bridging talent into communities and industries that they would probably not think of, things like fintech and insurance and areas that they wouldn't have assets. So one side of the house, and the reason I mention this is because the ultimate decider in terms of whether you structure your innovation as an external or internal factor or blend is dependent on two things. It's dependent on the compensation model for the people at the core of the business and how they're compensated. That has a huge, huge ordeal with it, because in our world, agents are compensated on revenue. Their job is to think about revenue to get their percentage of a film deal or a television deal or a NBA contract. We're motivated by asset creation and wealth creation, and they're two very different models. We're incentivized by two very different things. So I think that's one of the drivers. And the other driver is really, unfortunately, a lot of innovation will be driven by a head and top-down approach, whether people like to admit it or not. That is a very big part of it. And one of the things that I would say, just as a footnote, and certainly something for you to think about, is one of the greatest deterrents of innovation, certainly in the North American context, is a very simple thing that nobody thinks about and nobody talks about, which is governance. So the biggest issue blocking most large North American companies' adaptation to innovation is their board of directors. Because boards of directors are compensated on very different models than their executives are, and their structures are the same that they've been for 150 years. So until that model changes, until the board of directors and governance model changes, you will see a continued slower adaptation to a lot of non-digital DNA businesses in their willingness to innovate. So I think that's the answer is you got to look at the DNA of the business, determine which model makes the most sense to move the fastest, and then figure out how you structure from the head down.
Okay, thank you, Leonard. I think that will take me to Lear, because you're talking about like all these innovation and how like new companies are innovating, but Lear has been around for so many years. So I wonder how, what's the secret sauce of implementing this innovation in such company? Like Leonard was saying, it's so complicated to pass all the barriers of a company that has been there in the traditional ages. So what's the secret sauce that you have to say? And also before you mentioned that you recently acquired a startup, so I don't know if you want to discuss a little bit more about what's the process and what are your thoughts on what are you going to do with that startup in Israel?
Yeah, so let's start with the first question. Regarding innovation in very conservative companies, before I joined Lear about a year ago, I was head of R&D for 3M in Israel, and that's also a very old company, over 100 years, conservative you can call it, similar in a way to the automotive industry, but very different. So yeah, we're not an internet giant, we're not a hardware giant, neither 3M or Lear. But we are here and we are in Israel. And the question is, what is the evolution that such a big company is going through until they start looking into startups? So, talking about Lear, talking about the automotive industry, I don't think that it happened in one day. It's been a process. There were some companies that were early on in the market and some companies that are followers within the OEMs, within the tier ones, and within the giant players. I lived in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley for many years, and I remember 10 years ago seeing Google X, then cars on the 280 driving autonomously. So there was a driver on the side, but they were driving there. And I think there were very few people in Silicon Valley who knew what would be the vision, the automotive vision, in Silicon Valley or worldwide. Nobody really knew, but there were a few people that had that concept. And one of them was Sergey Brinks, and Google X became Waymo, and then we've seen Tesla around the same time. I actually joined Better Place in Palo Alto on the very early days, and we were trying to push forward innovation and business models to OEMs. That was very challenging. Having said that, 10 years ago, some of those Ubers and Teslas and Google X were already there. Then you're seeing companies that follow megatrends. So they're not shooting in all directions like Google X, but they follow megatrends. And I would say 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was clear that the electric vehicle market is going to evolve. It was clear that cities will change. It was clear that something will happen, but nobody really knew how. But there was one title, which was a megatrend, the next generation automotive. And then you saw companies that started to think beyond mechanical engineering type innovation and started slowly and surely hire software engineer, hardware engineers into those OEM car companies, and Lear is one of them. For example, when I worked at Better Place, I want to say 10 years ago, Lear was one of the early players in the electric vehicle market. So they already had components, mostly power electronics and chargers and battery management systems. They started developed internally for the automotive industry for electric vehicles before there were that many electric vehicles on the world. And today they're one of the leaders in the business. So that's the second example. And the third one were the OEMs and the tier ones that moved on relatively late, and that would be in the last few years. And you know, Israel is a great example for many of those OEMs and tier ones that are here, and they open innovation centers and R&D center, whether it's in cyber and electronics, software and hardware, communication. I think this is a great place for a big OEM or tier one to bring external innovation internally. But I do believe that it always has to be a match. So if you have one person at the company, at the OEM, who really believes in startups and really wants to see it happening, and he would open an innovation lab or innovation center in Israel, but there wouldn't be other supporters and many supporters and champions within the company, it's not going to happen. As much as you are looking to integrate those internal and external, it's not going to happen. So you really want to see those champions within the automotive companies or even the materials companies, if I'm speaking about my previous experience. And at Lear, it works, you know, really great, and I'm kind of, you know, jumping to the second question, because we recently acquired a company in Israel which is called EXO, and we're doing navigation accuracy, we're improving navigation of cars. For connected cars, so today we already have GPS in each car, and it's not very accurate, but we're also talking about the future cars, autonomous car, where the car will drive itself and you have to have the accuracy of a few centimeters. So we acquired EXO, and this is not the first acquisition that we've done. We already acquired companies both in Silicon Valley and Detroit. Lear is a company that knows how to acquire, knows how to merge startups to the company. We typically keep those startups separate, so not completely separate, but they keep their own entity. We try to keep the same people where they are and not try to shift them around. And it works pretty well, because at some point we merge them into the company, but they still work on the same product. And I think there are a few good examples here in Israel, like Waze, that was acquired by Google, and they kept the R&D center here, and it works pretty well. But of course, you have to be part of a big corporation and get to used to that type of culture.
Thank you, Michal.
Sure.
I think every corporation has to have their own secret sauce, I guess. So this leads me to Intuit, because Intuit focuses its activities in Israel actually working on the products and services that are developed in the Israeli companies that has been acquired. So, and that's open innovation, right? So how do you make the effort of maintaining the internal innovation in the company? That would be the first question. And then how does this process compares to the external innovation that you'd make an Intuit? And maybe if we can have the slide, please.
Yeah, oh, thank you. No, great questions. So the way we think about Intuit, you know, our CEO, Brad Smith, talks about Intuit as an 8,000 person startup, right? So what does that mean? In a company, in a large company, you know, to be innovative, in my mind, means enabling everyone in the company to be innovative. So the way I would put it is, you know, I would call it the 3 M's. Not 3M, but 3 M's. You know, it starts with a big mission, right? If you want to be an innovator, you're going to solve a really big problem. And so we focused on our mission, as I said, to be powering prosperity around the world. The second M is about equipping everybody with the methods, right, with the skills to be able to innovate. And I'll talk about the methods that we practice. And then finally, it's all about mentors. Being able to have the champions to be able to help those innovators overcome barriers that get in the way so that they can achieve, success. So when I talk about the methods, Scott Cook, who is our legendary founder, the coach for the Valley Innovators, he goes and coaches everyone in the company. Most recently, right here in Israel, as well as around the world, all 8,000 went through a process where he coached them to go first immerse themselves with customers. You talked about design thinking, right? It all begins with customer empathy. And we don't believe that it's a domain of only a few in the company to actually have that deep customer empathy. It's the job of everyone, every engineer, every person in the company. So he teaches the methods, the first one called customer-driven innovation, right? This is, if you can imagine three circles in a Venn diagram, the first one is about finding a really big unsolved problem, right, that hasn't been solved. The second circle, which intersects, is those problems, narrow down to those problems that we, or those we enable, and I'm coming to internal and external innovation, those we enable can solve well. And then the final circle is do this with durable advantage, the company being able to have a competitive advantage. So the intersection of these three circles is exactly where we teach engineers to focus, right? That's the sweet spot that created QuickBooks and TurboTax, our two flagship products. Now, when I take customer-driven innovation, how do you engineers practice this? And we have a method way before design thinking was a common term, right? Way before Eric Ries wrote the book, Lean Startup. Scott taught Design for Delight, which begins with what I talked about, immersing yourself, and that means following customers home. Don't listen to customers because customers may not always say what they do. Observe what they do in their own working environment so that you can actually make those observations, those insights that you bring back to find out what is that big unsolved problem that they're actually facing. And then it's about going broad to find many, many solutions. It's very easy for engineers to jump in and say, I got a solution, right? This is the one I want to productize. No, think about many, many different ways in which you can solve it by going really broad and then going narrow to find that one delightful solution. How do you find that? By iterating in the hands of customers. So build rapid prototypes. Don't even think about writing code. Draw them in paper, iterate with customers so that you can actually find that solution that truly is something that the customers wouldn't give back to you, even if it's a prototype. And so Scott teaches them through examples to everybody. We organize teams into 2 pizza teams, so no team is bigger than 2 pizzas can feed, about 8 people, so they can move fast. And we empower those teams to make decisions. So it's not the highest paid person in the office, example me, making the decision of what's a good idea. It's really every one of those 2 pizza teams proving whether this idea is something that customers will use. And those ideas win, right? So this is essentially the methodology we practice. There's many other methodologies. What you see up on the screen is my embarrassing journey line. We practice journey lines because we want to have people in these 2 pizza teams be diverse. They bring different perspectives. They can be designers, product managers, engineers, DevOps people, you name it, but everybody in the team innovates. And by understanding journey lines, where we come from, we can actually build empathy for teams and know when somebody comes up with an idea, where that idea came from. So this model is essentially what we practice. Now to your question about what did we learn from Israel, phenomenal things, right? So my mission is to really go hunt for the best, most innovative talent around the world that can come and solve the biggest problems in the world, right? 2/3 of Americans, as an example, can't bring $400 to bear to deal with an emergency. We're here to solve problems like that. In India, for example, where I'm based, the government essentially has decided we can't fix the physical infrastructure, so we want to leapfrog to a digital world. And so a bunch of volunteers have created what we call as the India Stack, which actually is now enabled every one of the billion Indians to have a digital biometric identity. And we built an India stack that allows, for example, a person who doesn't have physical infrastructure to be able to use digital cash to transact and be able to do digital businesses. And so Intuit is actually collaborating with those volunteers, the India Stack team, and the government to see how can we get very small businesses in India that have never used a computer to leapfrog and transact and do business completely digitally. So those kinds of innovations are the result of engineers in the company. Now, in terms of external innovation, I gave you some examples. You know, these ideas come from outside. The 2 startups we acquired in Israel are teaching us how to apply artificial intelligence to reimagine the way QuickBooks and TurboTax work and how we actually do serve small businesses. So to me, there's a lot we can learn, you know, by working with the ecosystem.
Thank you, Vijay. I'd personally love to hear more about this amazing journey line and all the practices that you actually do, but we're running out of time. So I wanted to specifically leave Ido for the end because I think SAP, well, everyone knows SAP is doing an amazing job by implementing all alternative methods of innovation. It's a VC, accelerator, external innovation, purchasing, acquiring, merging, collaborating, doing POCs. So the question is, how do you prioritize and how do you deal with both sectors maintaining the teams very focused? And it could be very interesting to hear what are the newest additions to SAP landscape in Israel.
Thanks for the question and the presentation. And first of all, thank you for inviting me, by the way. It was super interesting to hear all of you speak. I'm humbled, you know, to sit next to you. How do we look at innovation? We don't really prioritize like where to invest. Is it like early stage startups? Is it growth stage startups? Should we acquire? Or should we invest in our own people? We have 89,000 people around the world, so we figure out that some of them are smart, right? So we should just give them money and give them the opportunity to innovate. So it's not a matter of prioritization, it's a matter of dividing the efforts to those who need it when they need it. So for example, for internal innovation, we invest in teams of employees in SAP that feel like they have a good idea that can change or create a new business for SAP by utilizing existing assets that we have in the company. It's a bit like AWS for Amazon. It's like really changing, you know, the whole bottom line of the business. So that's where we invest in internal teams. In startups, we invest actually in places where we can imagine these startups align with our strategic way of thinking about our existing line of businesses. For example, if I take an example in the IoT space, so we try to envision like digital supply chain where they will be in 5 to 10 years from now, and that's where we're gonna put our money in for the early stage startups. For more mature startups that are already selling in millions and they already raise like substantial capital from large VCs, so we want to bring them in and maybe co-sell with them, maybe do some partnerships around OEMs and stuff like that. So that's our way of investing and, you know, potentially even acquire them in the end. And if we think that our sales force and, you know, this machine called SAP can actually amplify whatever it is they do, like in Gigia's case. Yes, so the latest addition, so since we are short on time, the latest addition to our portfolio here in Israel is BigID. They just finished their round A and we were proud to be a part of it. It's a GDPR company, so basically they are kind of if you think of it, it's a Google for personal data. They can actually visualize and give an enterprise a visibility where personal data of users are stored physically. They can identify personal identifiable data without tagging it. They can do it in unstructured data sets and very, very deep tech company. and now we are, excited about having them in our portfolio and see how we can help them, because, to be honest, I think 100% of our customers are approaching us and asking us how the hell are we going to deal with this thing that's called GDPR. If you guys are familiar, it's the European regulation about how you can store personal data and physically where you can put this data, and the right for each user to be forgotten. Yeah, so that's what they do.
Thank you so much. I wanted to end the panel with another question, but we won't have time. And this was going to be, how do you in your companies treat failure? Since in Israel, this is something that we focus on a lot, and it's actually not punished. And I think that is really a factor of why innovation is growing so fast in Israel. Instead of that, because we won't have time, so we will leave it for next summit, I wanted to end with a quote from Mark Zuckerberg that says, in a world that is changing really quickly, the only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking risks. And I think here we have the perfect example of this. So I really want to thank you all for participating, for your time, for your effort and preparation, and for sharing all this wisdom with all of us. Thank you so much.